Love your neighbor and buy local. That's the argument we make here on the David Tulis Show. David Tulis, the smartest guy in the bow tie. That leaves plenty of room for men like you, my listener, the man who matters. You are wearing a T-shirt. Maybe you're wearing an open collar shirt. Maybe if you're really working hard today and you strip down, you are wearing just your little necklace there around your neck and no shirt at all. Just give me a few minutes of your time, and we will align ourselves and think maybe True Thoughts will try to see how we can prosper more in Chattanooga. Now, this is David Tulis, and calling, you're live on the air. What's on your mind? Thanks for calling.
Supreme Court's ruled that you're only required to give your name. That's it.
No address, no date of birth?
No. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court was wrong in that decision because you should have to be able to talk to anybody. I was ordered by it. Fourth Amendment guarantees you that.
All right, I'm not, you're gonna have to. I tell you what, give me another call. Call me back. I can't hear you. You're breaking up on me. All right, that was Mike. He's saying that the Supreme Court ruled, and this erroneously, he says that all you have to give in an arrest is your name. Now the question is, what is an arrest? And I'm looking at my copy, my hard copy of Tennessee jurisprudence, and we are. Oh, here he is. Okay, Mike, I hope we have a better connection. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Supreme Court's ruled you only have to give your name. And on top of that, I don't know if you realize this, you can use any name you want as long as you don't do it for fraudulent purposes. You can change your name today. We do it in radio all the time. As long as you don't do it for fraudulent purposes, you don't have to use the name that you're given at birth.
Well, what about the false statement statute in your state? What about that? False statement requires you to make only true statements. He can lie to you, but you can't lie to him, Mike.
Well, you don't have a discussion. What's your name? My name's Mike. What's your last name? None of your business. What's your birthday? Are you going to send me a cake? Where in the law is that? Where? Listen, the Bill of Rights is there to stop government intrusion. No one. Let's never forget this. Anyone in power, from the president to the dog catcher, they can only do what the statute requires. And any statute that will require you to give your name or your phone number, your address, is unconstitutional on its face. Now, if you're in a motor vehicle, you have to present your evidence because you're nothing more than a corporate slave. You're a driver. You're acting in corporate status, basically. You got a license. But if you're walking down the street, you don't have to talk to anybody. The most the Supreme Court's ruled that if a police officer asks you, who are you, that you have to give your name. That's all they've ever said. And I think they're wrong in that. But let's say you give your name. Okay, what's your address? Why are you driving me home? What's your birthday? You going to send me a birthday cake?
Well, Mike, those are cute retorts, but what are you saying here? You're saying that the officer doesn't have authority to demand
anybody, because anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law.
Okay, so you should say nothing. You should simply say, I make no statement apart from my attorney. Am I under arrest?
You don't even say that. You say, my name is Bob Smith. Well, Bob, where are you going? Where are you going? Why do you want to know? Hey, listen, anything I say, you're going to use against me. So I have nothing to say regarding this conversation. Am I free to go? No.
Right.
They're going to arrest me.
Right. That is the question. And of course, if you're not free to go, what you're saying is, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, I said, and while you're arresting me, remember everything you have in your house because I'll be taking it after the lawsuit's over.
Well, that's kind of a saucy threat to the officer. I'm not sure I would encourage my listener making that kind of statement. But
it depends on the level that you're being threatened. Listen, if here's the deal: if they get a call that there was just a bank robbery, and the suspect looks like David Tulis, they can pull over people that look like David Tulis or walking down the street. You're still not required to give any information that would incriminate you. They'd have to physically take you, arrest you, put you in a lineup, and or take your fingerprints. They're the ones that are required to show the evidence. The founders did that for a reason. The founders, and this is in many other writings, it would be better to have 99 innocent people go free than one
you mean guilty people,
innocent person go to jail.
You mean 99?
So the system is set up to make it so difficult for the government. The government to arrest me. I laugh when I hear people go, "Well, you know, that criminal got off." You know, the system is there for the defendant. That's such garbage. Nothing goes to trial. You are charged with so many crimes, so you plead out. You know, you'll go to jail for 25 years if you don't take the plea of disorderly conduct. Nothing goes to trial. These prosecutors wouldn't even know how to prosecute a case. And look at this bus driver. He's got 12 attorneys. Did you know that? I'm sorry, not the bus driver. The trucker in Chattanooga that killed all those people several years ago. He has got, and I'm not exaggerating, 12 attorneys. 12. What do you think the state's going to do? All they're good for is threatening people. Threatening and harassing. Every single part of the state, whether it's a local government or a federal government. Threat and intimidation. That's what they're good for. That's what they
let's move on here, Mike. Let me ask you a question. What are the three main points of police reform that you, if you could meet the new chief, let's suppose for a moment that it's going to be Chief Edwin McPherson, Mr. McPherson. Let's say he's named the chief, and you had a chance to meet with him. What would you say are the three most important things that would restrain, limit police violence, and increase respect for the people's rights? What would you say in those directions, or other?
Peace officer. That's what you are. Your job is to maintain the peace.
I can't hear you.
You're a peace officer. Your job is to maintain the peace. The second thing is, if there's an incident where you don't have to kill someone and they're not involved in a felony, back off. Talk to them. You have time on your hands. Thirdly, abolish all police departments and get yourself meshed in or incorporated with the sheriff's department. Because the sheriff's department is an entity that is direct representative of the people. Police departments enforce statute. I hope people never forget this. The sheriff's department comes from the people, common law. We elect the sheriff. It's their job to protect your rights. The police is there as an entity of the state to protect the interest of the government and the state to enforce statute. There's a difference. The founders never, ever envisioned a standing army or a police department. They never envisioned that.
All right, thanks, Mike. The argument is that of the three reforms Mike Steele proposes, one would be that to the new chief, Mr. McPherson, the new chief should abolish his own department and incorporate his department with the sheriff's department. And again, the argument that he makes is that there is a common law origin for the sheriff. He represents the people. He can be voted out. No chief of police can be voted out, even though he is responsible to the mayor. The mayor and mayors pretend that policing organizations are independent of him, but they're not. They're wholly subject to mayoral discretion and authority. And the mayor sets policy. And so we have a white Democrat mayor, a white Jewish attorney, Democrat mayor, Andy Berke. And what we have happening in Chattanooga, the good and the bad, okay, the good and the bad reflect him. They reflect on him. So if there's a detective that solves a murder in Chattanooga, well, then Mayor Berke should get credit for that because that's his doing. It's his doing. If there is a perjury and false arrest, as in the Hanson Melvin case, and no doubt many others, then the blame for that it needs to be political. Police departments are political organizations. They serve a policy, right? Policy is police, right? They have the same word, and they enforce statute. Now, there is this big question that I have raised in the media here in Chattanooga, and that is, does the police department in fact have statutory authority given the restraints in the law on municipal corporations? Chattanooga is a municipal corporation and doesn't have the authority to enforce statute. So Mike is saying their police departments have a sole job of enforcing statute. They're law enforcement. They're not peacekeepers and not responsible. They enforce statute, which is to say the continuing claims by the state against the people. Statutes are claims by the state against the people, pretendedly for the people. No doubt there's a lot of marketing in that direction, but they are always against you. They're against you, though some, one could say, do seem to protect you, do seem to provide some benefit for you. We argue here, love your neighbor and buy local. The number is 800-89 800-8949. And we're waiting for word about, as hundreds of people stream over to the Amazon job fair this morning, we're waiting for a word from the mayor on his naming a chief of police. There are major reforms. Now, the question that I want to mention to you, my listener here at Nooga Radio, David Tulis, brought to you by Nooganomics.com, Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Now, the reforms are several, and here, let me just sketch them out real quick, just so you'll know what to think about as you hear these names mentioned, and then the mayor will have no doubt a press conference introducing the new chief, probably at the Police Services Center on Anacola Highway. David Tulis, call, you're live on the air. What's on your mind? Is this a pocket call or is this a real person? Sounds like a mistaken call. All right, here in a nutshell, there needs to be, when Edwin McPherson takes the job as chief of police, he needs to consider several things. There needs to be, at every traffic stop, Miranda warnings given, because the definition of arrest is the moment the blue lights are on, you are under arrest in the law. Okay, that's a 2001 decision reaffirmed by the High Court, and that is State versus Garcia, 2003, I think. Okay, so when there needs to be Miranda warnings, and the benefit of Miranda is that you know you're under arrest, and so you're not going to say anything that's going to incriminate you. And anything you say or produce or show or yield to will be used against you in court. Now, because traffic and commerce is quasi-commercial and quasi-criminal, people think that it's not a criminal matter. But if you're stopped by the cops, even though it is a transportation and commercial stop, it is a criminal matter, okay? And so you need to have your Miranda rights read to you, and Chief McPherson needs to insist on that. There needs to be an end to the culture of intimidation and false charges. I would say largely aimed at minorities and the poor. And when I get to that point, the question then becomes: is that the main issue? Is it a racial issue of the need for police reform? Is it a racial reform as well? It is in the effect, in the fruit, but the substance of the problem is not a race issue. It's not even a class issue. It's an issue, I would like to suggest, of the conflict between the state and the people, the liberties of the people, and the necessities and compulsions and needs of the state, right? The state needs to control, the state needs to market its claims against you, and so it does so by policing under statute, under these statutes that are enforced. Most stops by police are not of real crimes. They are of statutory offenses, right? Offenses that are not evils in themselves, but are called mala prohibitas, evils by prohibition. A mala in se, in Latin, an evil in itself. Mala is like malediction, right? Mal is bad, a bad saying. Malediction is mala. Mala in se is an evil in itself. Rape and murder are malas in se. Driving on suspended, driving on revoked, which is what a lot of black people get charged with, are mala prohibitas. They are wrongs by prohibition. They're not evils. They're just customs. Okay, they're simply customs, and the police enforce them. So the larger issue is we'll debate this with Franklin McCauley in a minute. Is it a racial issue, or is it a larger issue of the state against the people? The state continuing to grow. We have the cartel. You might say the sovereign state, as opposed to the people who think they have representative government, but who do not. There needs to be work by the new chief against the honor code of silence. We're seeing that in the Hanson Melvin case. After he was arrested illicitly and in a criminal fashion, he was returned home by a friend. And as they sat in the parking lot, they were descended upon by at least eight officers. David Campbell was not among them, but eight other officers, again, arrested Hanson Melvin, detained him, searched him, and asked him very pointed questions, as if somehow David Campbell realized he had done something wrong, and here his friends were going to cover up for him and somewhat intimidate Hanson Melvin, a Christian man, a family man, and these problems, the Miranda warnings, the intimidation problems, the perjury culture, I say would come under the main legal heading, and that is probable cause. If there's no probable cause, an officer cannot stop anybody, okay? Probable cause has to be present in his mind. And you, my listener, are forewarned about this. And the question to ask to determine if probable cause exists is this. Here's the question. Am I free to leave? Okay. Am I free to leave? If you're not free to leave, you are under arrest. And at that point, you better shut your mouth. You need to do two more things after that. Close your mouth and bite your tongue. Okay. Those are the things you need to do and not say anything, because at that point, you're under arrest. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. And poor people don't know this. And people who are ground into the industrial judicial complex in Hamilton County don't know how to deal with police. They just don't know how to do it. And they consent to searches and all kinds of things. Consent to search of their houses, their cars, their bags, their personal effects, and they should say no. And so I think with a little courage, people can work on the real problem with the help of the new chief. And that is, there cannot be any encounter with a member of the public that is the law enforcement type unless there's probable cause. Now, officers know they don't have probable cause, but what they do is they have a conversation with you, fishing for reasonable suspicion or probable cause. And usually because the victim, the person who's being stopped, continues to gab and does not arm up, if you will, that person loses his rights and is subject then to arrest. And so this of course is the police state. We have the police state because we don't have our papers, right? We don't have courage. No one stands for his personal liberties. If we're slaves, then of course you just give in. If we're slaves, we don't ask the right questions. We don't say, what is your authority? And we don't ask, I think the questions to ask are in the direction of the transportation script that Eddie Craig has published. And I'll mention more about that later. But I think if we have the right questions that suggest courage, right? Not living in fear, Christians and other people who don't have the confidence of God in their hearts, they can stand against the man, right? They can not be the property of the state. Is it a white state? Maybe. Is it an Anglo-Saxon state? Probably. But again, I think the issue is not simply a racial one. I think it is a greater conflict, and that is, again, the state versus the individual. And the fact that these officers are white and that many of their victims are black, that makes it even worse. Because that evokes memories of the past, of brutality, of police dogs hounding innocent protesters, water cannons being aimed at protesters in Birmingham in the 1960s, all kinds of other grievous injuries by the political and legal establishment against people who are simply making political statements, asking for respect, asking for laws and their protection, asking for an end to harassing racially oriented laws. Do you know that the Tennessee gun law that is mentioned in today's news cycle about the man who was arrested, charged, and cleared by Judge Starnes in the Cancun shooting, he was charged with the intent to go armed statute. Do you know where that law came from? It was an anti-black law, an anti-Negro law, so that no black person could have even a club 4 inches or longer on his person. You can't even have a club. You can't even have a knife longer than that. That comes because the white Democrat establishment at the time wanted to disarm every black person and to give caprice to the officer. The officer has the ability just on a whim to stop someone and then charge that person if he has any weapon at all. Even a stick could be a charge of a black person. But of course, who gets it when laws like that are passed? Everybody. The white, the Hispanic, the black, the Oriental, everyone alike. When the laws are unjust, when they are arbitrary and vaguely worded, everyone suffers, though the intent of the writers of the statute was against the black man. The freedman, the black man, the slave who's out on errands, and then after the war to prevent Southern independence, the blacks freed by the war. All equally alike, made subject to the legal and political establishment of the time, the police establishment. It was the Nat Turner Rebellion in a plantation in Virginia that caused great fear across the South, and the arrival of these arbitrary and capricious laws. And we're living under them today. And Republicans who say they care about blacks, who say the party of Lincoln, what has that party done to remove this odious statute in the Tennessee Code, a crime called carrying with the intent to go armed? is simply unconstitutional. And guess what? A Christian man of principle is defying that law and has demanded that it be overturned as unconstitutionally vague. And you're not hearing about that in any media platform in Tennessee except mine, David Tulis, Nooganomics.com, and also here at Nooga Radio. We're going to talk with a humanitarian and social reformer, Franklin McCauley. We're going to talk about the arrival of the new police chief and race relations, particularly touching on enforcement, law enforcement, and the culture of fear in many parts of Chattanooga brought about by Code Blue. David Tulis, Nooga Radio.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.